Hey, crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with a little bit more discernment. Today, we are diving back into the Archaix Chronicon. We will be reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points that are brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but people will find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. In addition to that, if you find value, I ask that you do all of the wonderful things down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow, throw me a comment, whether you agree or disagree. If it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If you truly find value, I ask that you hit the super thanks. Consider joining for a membership or picking up a copy of any of my books. The first one, A Series of Unconventional Beliefs, details the procedure by which I learned how to heal myself using the Holy Spirit through the will of God. Don't get it twisted. The second one is my work in alchemy. The green stone I consider to be the completion of Carl Jung's Mysterium Conjunctionis. I got a key that he was missing, as well as his work with the archetypes. And the third one is the most relevant today. A house built upon shifting sands is the final outflow, the synthesis of my Bible study, which is one of the playlists that is linked in the corner above. The Bible study is an unconventional Bible study because we took off the predetermined glasses that most people read that particular book with. And it led to a lot of wonderful insights about actual reality and our perceptions thereof. Um, all three of these books are available for purchase through the links provided down below, but you can watch them for free. I read them aloud in the playlists that are linked according to the name of the book. I do that so that you can get a full understanding of me, of who I am, and why I say the things that I do. There is a reason I start every video that way. I do not state things idly. I do not fly off the handle, right? If I am speculating, I'm pretty good about maintaining that it is speculation. I try not to draw conclusions necessarily from my pre-making or my pre-made understandings unless there is a physical contradiction, something that is quite literally a contradiction to the understanding, and then we try to discern which one is correct, right? But a lot of that remains in speculation. There was nobody here in the beginning. So everything about the beginning is going to be speculation. We have zero accurate written accounts of how the entire universe was created. All we have is speculation. I have my speculation. The very first, well, the second chapter, there's chapter 0, which is the origin story of me. In the first book, the first chapter is my speculations on how creation happened. I have stated it several times as we went along. I do have to do some housekeeping, however, because words are important. The things that we choose to use when stating the things that we believe are vitally important. And since we are in the text and we have these numbers repeatedly, I'm going to run through them real quick and we're going to discuss something. All right, 3103 BC, 792 Annus Mundi, 5,208 before Armageddon, 864 before the flood, 2,136 Anunnaki chronology, 1,206 Phoenix chronology, 936 orbital chronology, 336 descent of the watchers, 270 Olmec calendar, 10 in the Mayan calendar. Now, out of these, we have some fairly reliable dates. And by fairly reliable, it means that we can trace track and have some kind of an understanding about where they came from. 3103 BC is a arbitrary designation. We decided that this date at 0 was going to be a thing, even though there's really not any good reason for that, but we decided, and so it is. And so we do have a division from before Christ and after Christ. It is an arbitrary, but it is there. For the Olmec calendar, we know when that was. The Mayan calendar, exact same thing. These are accurate dates that we can actually pin to something concrete, something tangible, something with a reason. The rest of these, we don't, right? We do not know. It could be that this is exactly correct, but we do not know that the date of Armageddon is 5,208 years after 3103 BC. We can assume that. We can even deduce that from source materials, but we cannot know that until the time has come. It's one of those things about evidence. You gotta have it. This Anunnaki chronology, I am sure that that comes from somewheres. I am sure that that is pulled from somewheres other than out of an ass, but we have not seen that evidence. There has been no solidity given to an understanding that would be that 2,136 years prior to 3,103 BC, that the Anunnaki came down and began a calendar. That is an extrapolation from information that may or may not be viable. Now we get into the why I'm doing this particular little diatribe right here at the beginning, because these things have meaning, right? Armageddon is a specific understanding. Now, your specific understanding and my specific understanding may not be the same, but we are looking forward to a date when things reset or are destroyed, right? That is a good, general, broad understanding of Armageddon. Now, that could be Ragnarok, that could be the second coming of Christ, that could be the Kali Yuga coming back. It could be a variety of things. But the event is that Armageddon is the reset or the destruction of the current system. And so we at least have a frame of reference for using Armageddon. Even if we don't know when it will be, we can speculate about it because of things that are written in other places. And there is zero problems with that, right? But it is speculation because, once again, we will not know. The Phoenix chronology, I'm sure there is something. Orbital chronology, I'm sure that there is some work in antiquity that would lead you to believe these things, and it may be accurate. I don't line those things out just randomly, right? It is entirely possible that these things are actual chronological events that have a firm foundation. I simply have not had evidence of that. But these words, they have meaning, right? We know what Mayan means. We know what Olmec means. We know what calendar means. We know what Armageddon means. We know what BC means. Do we know what AM means? AM is Annus Mundi. Annus Mundi means the year that humans became, the year that humans were, the year that life as humanity started. That is what Annus Mundi means. It doesn't mean since the reset, right? That would be a whole different chronology. That doesn't mean that there were men pre-existing 792 Annus Mundi. That means that there were no men prior to 792 Annus Mundi. It doesn't mean that the system was reset. That would be a Phoenix chronology. That doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that there was an existent civilization prior to that particular date, which was 3,800 or so, right? 3,900 or so. We've went through it. It doesn't matter because it is an arbitrary date, but it does mean something. And if you are going to state it as a thing, right? 792 was the years before 3103 BC, was the year that humanity was created. You don't also get to say that humanity existed prior to that. You can use a different chronology. You can use orbital chronology, Phoenix chronology, Nibiru chronology, Armageddon chronology, reset chronology, Ragnarok chronology, whatever you want, right? But you don't get to use the one that we have for this one specific thing to describe something else. That would be contradictory. That would be discrediting, even. And then we got another problem here in the header, right? Now, that is a specific situation. I'm not going to dive into where it came from, but this one I will, because there is a comment on one of the videos, and I appreciate your comments. I do. I appreciate your disagreements with me, and I try to be respectful in my responses. If there is not a reason to respond, I won't. And if I can't do it respectfully, I won't. But I do try to respond to as many comments as I possibly can. I try to at least heart them, but I do try to give a a verbalization, right? Write it out so that you know that, yes, I see this. I acknowledge your point of view and I may disagree with it, but we can be respectful in that. The comment was is that Jason never uses the flood as a reference point. Excuse me? What is this? Words have meaning. 864 before the flood. Is that talking about a regional flood like I do? No, no, it is not. It is talking about the Noahic deluge, right? Not the other one, but the Noah one. That is specifically what this is talking about. That is explicitly explained as we have gone along, that it is talking about the flood that destroys humanity as described in the Bible. The comment was that this simply does not exist. And that just means that you don't know what you're talking about. That is exactly what is explained as the meaning for this date in the entirety of this document. Now, I do want to point out one other thing. It is entirely possible and quite likely that Jason's views have evolved since this particular thing has been printed, and he has probably taken up several different viewpoints from this. I have from my works, right? That's why we have a second edition for the first book, because there was an evolution, right? A deepening of understanding that needed to be expressed, and so I updated. This is not an updated work, and I am fully aware of that. I'm not attacking Jason. A lot of y'all seem to think that I am, but I'm not. This is about the ideas behind it. And I'm not, again, I am not completely dismissing those things that I don't agree with. I may sound like it when I am speaking, I am not. If there is something in here that can bring me to a greater understanding, I will accept it. I will correct myself, but there's a lot of problems with consistency, right? There's problems with chronology. We went through Jasher 2 yesterday. Chronology, bro. How can you read that, take it as a source, and say that you stand for chronology? It doesn't make sense. You're not looking at the full picture. You're looking at it through the lens of what you want it to be. I try not to do that. And I know it is impossible not to do that, but I do put myself into an objective position, right? It may not seem like it because I say things, right? But if I have an understanding that is directly contradictory to anyone else's understanding, I'm going to say it. That might take courage, right? To state fully and firmly that the Bible is a created narrative in order to control people is putting myself in opposition with a third of the planet. Does that not take a little bit of courage? And I am using that intentionally. There is a degree of courage in having your ideas challenged, and I welcome that. There is a degree of challenge, right? A degree of courage in the challenge that is having those narratives corrected. The problem is that that can't just be one-sided, right? It can't just be me who gets corrected. I understand that I am the underdog in this particular situation. But what you don't understand is that I am not locked in the room with you. You were locked in the room with me. I am here bringing the truth, and it doesn't matter if there is a single person that believes it. Right? There are people who believe untruth all the time. There are people that believe a variety of things that are provably untrue, right? And I'm going to use the flat earth because I know Jason doesn't believe in the flat earth, right? There are many people who believe in the flat earth, right? That is a completely false narrative, and it doesn't really even take courage to stand in opposition to that. The Bible is a false narrative, and it doesn't really take a whole, well, it does take some courage. I'm not going to lie. That is one of those narratives that it takes a lot of courage to stand in the face of, right? You can take that as self-grandizing. I don't care. I am not here in the spirit of me. I am in the spirit of the truth. I am in the spirit of discernment. I am in the spirit of let's find out what is. I mean, and if the evidence leads towards a conclusion that I do not already hold, I will change that. And I have proof of that. You can watch my Bible study. The Bible study did not start off the unconventional Bible study. The Bible study started off lessons from the book. And there are still several videos that are no longer in the playlist that are titled that. And you can go back and see where I was. And then you can watch the playlist that is the Unconventional Bible Study, where I took off a very specific set of glasses and I read the book for what it says. And my viewpoints changed in real time. You can watch me correct myself in those videos to completely change my understanding of what I thought I knew into something that is more based upon things that are real. There is no evidence that there ever was a deluge, that there was a worldwide cataclysm of flooding to the level in which it is attributed. That is just simply true. Now, you can believe that using this reference means that he doesn't say it, but that does not make it true. Using this particular reference before the flood as a specific indicator of a biblical chronology confirmed by Jasher. You can say that, but it doesn't make it true, right? This is that reference. That is exactly what is being referenced right here in this header. Okay, now we can get to the text. This begins the Kali Yuga calendar of ancient India, known as the Black Age, that began with the emergence of an eight-armed goddess, a bloodthirsty queen. Her symbol was an upside-down pentagram. She was remembered as the wicked deity Shiva by the Hindu, having eight arms, a deity of destruction. She is Spider Woman in Old America, but the early Egyptians recalled her as a male deity, the Scorpion King, eight-armed arachnid. Kali is the feminine form of the Sanskrit Kala, meaning time. The Persians relate that on this date there was a disters. Not trying to pick on the spelling. I have plenty of spelling problems, right? It just threw me. Involving a flooding. Involving a what? The Persians relate on this date there was a disaster involving a flooding. In 290 BC, 293 BC to be precise, the Egyptian priest historian Manetho studied the Egyptian Old Chronicle that cites 113 regnal descents in a 36,525 year period to Pharaoh Scorpion. But the text is a code, as evidenced by the number 36525, being the same as the solar year at that time, 365.25 days. That is an assumption you are making unless it is explicitly stated in the text. Interestingly, this sum is decoded by dividing it by 13 lunar months, the lunar year, which gives us 2,810 years before 293 BC for the date of 3103 BC. In this year, the chronologist king, Enoch, was 170 years old. This was the 130th year of his prophesying against the Anunnaki and his 48th year as emperor. Kali is a fragment memory of the Anunnaki dynasty that was then emerging but not yet in power, at least not over the Sethites. The Anunnaki were the ruling class, but they weren't ruling over the Sethites. So many contradictions. The date 3100 BC is the time assigned by Egyptologists to the rule of Narmer, who unified all of the people into a united kingdom. Narmer is, in fact, Enoch, described with the epithet Nar. Ner is the same, representing 600, an epoch, and Mer, the Egyptian designation for pyramid, 3100 BC being Enoch's 108th year of rule. I do not see the correlation there, right? Narmer is in fact Enoch, described with the epithet Nar, Mer. Okay, so 600 pyramid, is that what you're trying to say here, right? It means 600 pyramid. What does that have to do with Enoch? Where is the record that this was actually Enoch? And again, Jasher doesn't count. Vedic Puranic text read that the Kali Yuga, like Jasher has been discredited already. We're in the second video of actual Jasher and it is broken already. Vedic Puranic text read that the Kali Yuga age would end after 3,100 years with the appearance of a savior king, the great Saka, who will remove wickedness from the earth. This 3,100 years counts down to 2 BC, the birth of Jesus. Tradition attests it was this great Saka that the Persian Magi sought when Jesus was born. Where do you even start? I mean, the Vedic Purana texts read that the Kali Yuga age would end after 3,100 years with the appearance of a savior king, the great Saka, who would remove wickedness from the earth. And this 3,100 years counts down to the birth of Jesus. And here's the kicker. Here's the thing that verifies this, makes it valid all the way through, right? This right here is the proof positive that this is a true thing. When Jesus was born, all of the wickedness disappeared from the earth. There was no longer any wickedness whatsoever. It's all gone. We no longer have wickedness. From the time that Jesus was born, the new age of no wickedness began. Yeah, that's exactly not what happened, but okay. Now, there is no reason to believe any of this particular narrative. I have gone through that in the Bible study. So there's 161 videos, or there are 13, depending on how you want to consume that particular knowledge. Footnotes 1. The Secret Doctrine. 6. We have read through the entirety of the Secret Doctrine. There's not a whole lot of good information in there. There's some, but not a lot. 2. The Illustrated Book of Signs and Symbols. 20. 3. The Oxford Illustrated Companion. 1A3. There's the number of manifestations, slightly jumbled. 4. Survivors of Atlantis. 58. 5. Secret Cities of Old South America. 408. 6. The Destruction of Atlantis. 193. 7. Round Towers of Atlantis. 345. Citing Asiatic researches. The calendrics of 3103 BC further support its calendric import. The Kali Yuga age began in the year 792 Annus Mundi. That's where men were here, right? They've been here for 792 years total. 792 being the total orbit of the Anunnaki planet Nibiru. The Kali Yuga being the beginning of the Anunnaki rulership over part of humanity. I laugh because what does that mean? Right? That doesn't mean anything. It does not mean anything that this particular year was 792 years of the total orbit of the planet Nibiru. It means absolutely nothing. That it has zero correlative effect. This was 864 years before the flood? No. The sum of 864 being a number that links both time and space like no other number as seen in 3031 BC. Also, 3103 BC is 5,208 years before Armageddon when the Anunnaki are defeated by the chief cornerstone in 2106 AD. 5,208 years being 744 times 7 or 434 times 12. As will be shown in this research, a period of judged time is 434 years or 62 weeks of years in biblical eschatology. The Black Age begins a countdown to the end of the Anunnaki dominion. 3102 BC, 793 Annus Mundi. Scholars are at variance over the start of the Kali Yuga age, some believing it began in 3102 instead of 3103. Because some consider this as year one of the Kali Yuga, then the start date of 3103 is precise. Footnote 1, Children of the Sun 422, note. 3100 BC, 795 Annus Mundi. This is the scholarly imposed approximate for the Narmer palette, as known as the Victory Tablet of King Menes, which depicts a picture of a smooth-sided pyramid that Zechariah Sitchin holds as proof that even at this early date the concept of the pyramid was known. Yes, it exceeds that date by a significant amount of time. The true date is 3103 BC, 3 years earlier. It is to be noticed that between 3163 BC and 3103 BC that the world's most mysterious and well-preserved calendrical systems were all begun. 3163 BC, Newgrange and Stonehenge. Enoch is 110 years old. 3121 BC, the Mayan Itza Temple of the Cross Enoch is 152 years old. 3113 BC, the Mayan long count, Enoch is 160 years old. And 3103 BC, Vedic Kali Yuga calendar, Enoch is 171 years old. It is not without significance that the three timelines from 3121 to 3103 BC are all begun within 18 years of each other and are all systems employing ages measured in multiples of 144,000 days, 288,000, 432,000, etc. Well, that is a wide variation. Like this is a doubling, right? Is this a doubling again? Not really. That would be, yeah, that would be a 6, that would be a 7, that would be a 5. So no, it's not a doubling. Footnotes. 1. Journey to the Mythical Past, 1617. There may be some correlation between this, right? I cannot rule that out. I was not there. We do not have a record of why they began their calendars. We can speculate that it was because of events in the sky. That is a good speculation, in my opinion, but it is still speculation. Enoch being this age has no bearing, right? There is, as far as I am aware, and maybe that will be contradicted by Jasher, but as far as I am aware, there is no reason to believe that Enoch ever came to the North or South American continents at all, right? And so the Mayan Itzuk Temple of the Cross and the Mayan long count calendar, which are the same civilization, right? Being dated to Enoch, I don't understand the significance of that, other than I want it to be true, right? I want it to be true that Enoch came here, but we don't really have any records of that happening. We just wanted to be true. 3073 BC, 822 Annus Mundi, 5178 before Armageddon, 834 before the flood, 2166 Anunnaki homeworld, 2136 Phoenix chronology, 966 orbital chronology, 366 descent of the Watchers, 300 Olmec calendar, 40 Mayan calendar, and 30 Vedic calendar. The Anunnaki homeworld Nibiru reaches aphelion, furthest distance from the sun, after traveling away from the inner system far out into the Kuiper belt for 366 years since passing over the ecliptic in 3439 BC. It now begins to journey back towards the inner system. This is the 200th year of the life of Enoch. 3067 BC, 828 Annus Mundi, 5172 before Armageddon, 828 before the flood. 2172 Anunnaki chronology, 1242 Phoenix chronology, 972 orbital chronology, 372 descent of the Watchers, 306 Olmec calendar, 46 Mayan calendar, 36 Vedic calendar. Planet Phoenix enters the inner system, completing its 138-year orbit and begins its journey back out into the Kuiper belt. This was the second time that Phoenix entered the inner system since Enoch was alive. The Phoenix is a planet of chronology, and Enoch was famous for being a seer chronologist. Only in Jasher. The two facts do not seem to be unrelated. This year is the exact midpoint of antediluvian history, being 828 years after man was banished from Eden in 3895 BC, and 828 years to the Great Flood. The what? The Great Flood in 2239 BC, as this is 46 years after start of Mayan calendar. Sometime in this year is the 552nd year of Mayan chronology. 3031 BC, see 864 Annus Mundi, 5136 before Armageddon, 792 before the flood, 2208 Anunnaki chronology, 1278 Phoenix chronology, 1008 orbital chronology, 640 in the Jewish calendar, 408 in the descent of the Watchers, and 72 in the Vedic calendar. After 330 years below the ecliptic, the ancient Earth Killer Comet Group enters the inner system, passing close to Earth, illuminating the skies. This year is of great calendrical significance. It was Enoch's 120th year as emperor, and as it was 864 Annus Mundi, it began a 792-year countdown to the Great Flood in 2239 BC. 792 being the orbital period of the Anunnaki planet Nibiru. But just a couple of years later, it began, or earlier, right? In 3073, it began its trip back, right? That was 3073, and this is 3031, so that is 40 years. The orbital period of the Anunnaki planet Nibiru. The year was 2208 of the Anunnaki chronology, or 552 times 4 years, and 408 years since their descent to Earth, or 2,448 plus 2,448 months. Why are we using months? Didn't we say that we can't use months? It has to be days. And they didn't keep track by years either, so I guess it wasn't significant. In Egypt, the number for catastrophe was 2448, as seen in 1447 BC. The number 864 links time and space and is the most important of all calendrical numbers. I will be very interested in that. It is the mathematical nexus between all the world's calendrical systems based off of the numbers 6, 12, and 144, a golden proportion number. In time and space, it relates to the movement of the Earth. A day is 86,400 seconds. 60 days is 86,400 minutes. 360 days is 8,640 hours. 24 years is 8,640 years. What? That is obviously a misprint. I am not going to. What? Hold on, because the next one's the same. Yeah, that almost certainly should have been a iteration of months, right? There's no way that he is trying to say that 24 years equals 8,640 years. I am not going to try to attribute that to him. I'm not trying to assert things that aren't. And so I'm going to make the assumption that, but it can't be, right? Because 72 years is 864 months. There is no way that 24 years is going to exceed that by a factor of 10, right? There's just not going to be a possibility. So maybe it is 86.4, right? Maybe that is the breakdown, but that doesn't seem like it's going to work in math either. I'm just going to assume that this is a mistake in mathematics, right? That it was not an intentional thing. But this has been out a while. The sum of 864 is 432 plus the 432. That is true. Math does math. Or 144 times 6, or 108 times 8. As the Earth orbits the Sun every 864 years, the zodiac retrogrades 12 degrees in the cycle of progression. A degree being 72 years, 11 degrees is 792 years. This occurs as the Earth travels along the ecliptic plane at 66,600 miles per around the Sun. Impossible. We don't orbit. It's a projection. It's just a simulation. It's only a screen. There is no real orbiting going on. The Sun's radius is 432,000 miles, giving it a diameter of 864,000 miles. About 108 times the diameter of the Earth, minus 8,640 years. Earth's own equatorial diameter before the flood was 7,920 miles. But the equatorial bulge was caused at the Great Flood in 2239 BC, increasing its girth by 6.41 miles. The Earth is 93 million miles away from the Sun, and by these unusual facts seems to be commiserate. What? Because of the size of the Sun, the size of the Earth, and the distance between them, the dark shadow behind the Sun pointing away from the Sun, called the umbra, always points away from the Sun at a distance of 864,000 miles. The umbra is the region of total shadow, unlike the penumbra, which is a partial shadow. This year of 3106 BC is also the 864th month of the Vedic chronology. This date concerns something of importance to the Anunnaki, perhaps a sign or the start of a movement. Sure, why not? Just whatever. Like, obviously, it's something. We don't know what, but surely it's something, right? Surely there is some significance every day. Three calendars all relate to the Anunnaki. And I'm assuming that is the three calendars that all relate to the Anunnaki involve this date. Of course, the Anunnaki chronology, the descent of the waters, and the Vedic calendar. As, as this is years before the flood, here too is an Anunnaki related countdown to the end of their dominion and kingdoms at the Diluvian disaster of 2239 BC. Are you saying that there was a Diluvian disaster, that the earth was flooded? Is that what you're saying? Hmm. Okay. By studying the architecture of the Great Pyramid, researchers were able to determine how long the royal cubit was. They discovered that the unit of measurement to lay out the monument would measure the circumference of the earth out in 86,400,000 cubits. Further, the Hebrew grammatical value of the words world and all nations, as well as the word habitation, all equal 432. I have stated emphatically that gematria is useless, and I stand on that. Combining these ideas, we get 864 for whole inhabited world. Footnotes 1. Fingerprints of the gods 242. 2. The energy grid 8687. That is an interesting one. I probably want to check out at some point. Atlantis in America 265. And 4. Stones and Scarlet Thread 51 through 52. 2965 BC, 930 Annus Mundi, 5070 before Armageddon, 762 before the flood, 2274 Anunnaki chronology, 1344 Phoenix chronology, 1074 orbital chronology, 706 Jewish calendar, 148 Mayan calendar, 138 Vedic calendar. Hey, there's the number of manifestation again. Adam died, the ancients tolling his years from man's banishment in 3895 BC. But Adam was created by the Anunnaki in 4039 BC. Boy, is that not a direct contradiction to what was stated before? 144 years priorly. Thus, the man actually outlived Methuselah by 105 years, living 1,074 years. If you are just watching, this is your first video. Previously, there was an entire discussion about this. What is stated in this text is that the Anunnaki were not the creators, that God was coming later, and that the Anunnaki were upset about that. That was stated in this text, not pulling it from some other text, trying to discredit this text. That is a direct contradiction inside of the text with itself. Found a lot of those in the Bible. You should check it out. On his deathbed, Adam gathered his sons, and a scribe is brought to record his prophecies. So now Adam is giving prophecies too. On his deathbed, Adam gathered his sons, and a scribe is brought to record his prophecies. He relates that the flood is coming and will kill everyone but 8 people. He orders that his body is to be buried at the middle of the earth. Giza, c. 2815 BC. There are no tombs in Giza, this being the prime meridian of the pre-flood world. Okay, so previously in this text, this is new information, right? We didn't have Adam giving a prophecy for the flood. We had Enoch doing so, and everybody forgot about it, even though he was the wisest man who ever walked the earth, the perfect leader who corrected humanity in 3 times, 3 separate times at least. He brought all of humanity together and corrected their ways by giving them instructions from the Lord. That's what this text states. That is, and so now what we have is Adam is giving a prophecy. Adam is saying that there's going to be a flood, but again, that is going to be completely ignored. But this time we have the qualifier, right? That is coming, but only 8 people are going to be destroyed or preserved. That is different than the prophecy that was given to Noah, right? Or to Enoch. We ain't got to Noah yet. That was different than the prophecy that was given to Enoch, the most perfect leader who corrected people 3 times. Right? We did that in Jasher yesterday. Jasher 2 was talking directly about this. And so it's still fresh in my mind, even though I am absolutely going to forget Jasher just as soon as we are done with it. But once again, we see direct contradictions within the text to the text itself. He commanded that Seth was to carry out the project, his firstborn son of the lineage that would be saved from destruction. His firstborn son, you say. And Seth would be preserved. Okay. Adam gives Seth an ark with holy relics of gold, incense, and myrrh, and declared that God himself had provided these artifacts as signs to mankind in the future. That's not apologetics at all for what you believe to have happened at the birth of Christ. These relics were to be preserved on the ark, a ship that would endure the deluge, and afterwards be placed in a city at the middle of the earth. We have not actually got to the deluge in Jasher. I think that might be today, it might be tomorrow, but we are doing an exploration live of Jasher, so you are more than welcome to come and leave your comments, ask your questions, whatever you want. That is why we are doing it live. But this may be the account that is given in Jasher, but it is absolutely not the account that is given in Genesis. Right? It is definitely not. Now, again, I don't agree that Genesis is the authority on anything. But well, if you are going to use it as a source, you can't use it and a contradicting source about the same thing. Though he predicted that the city would be destroyed and plundered after the flood, who is going to plunder it? Right? Destroyed, we can understand destroyed, right? Destroyed means something specific. It means torn apart, set into disarray, eradicated from existence. That is all destruction. Plundered means that somebody came and took the spoils thereof. And if it was destroyed by the flood, there were only 8 people alive. Who despoiled it? Who plundered it? Who plundered this city after the flood? Because again, that is not a narrative that is recorded in Genesis, right? It might be in Jasher. We haven't got there yet, but it is also, as far as I am aware, not recorded in Enoch. It's not recorded in any of the other extra biblical texts. Where exactly is this reference point coming from? What is the data set for this? The relics would be preserved until the word of God made man shall come. Well, that is a complete and disqualifying statement, right? Every man is an expression of the word, but no single man was ever the word. If that is confusing, check out the Bible study. If that is confusing, a series of unconventional beliefs. If that is confusing, a house built upon shifting sands will all give you a reference for why this is incorrect. And king shall offer the gold, incense, and myrrh as tokens of his holy divinity. Adam died in the 243rd year of Enoch's reign, the prophet emperor, separating himself for long periods of time to be instructed by God about the future of the earth. That's when he gets the prophecy, right? That's when he gets this prophecy that was just attributed to Adam. Though news of Adam's death was not known immediately, the inhabitants of the earth knew that something dreadful had happened because at the same hour the sun darkened in daytime. There was an eclipse. Holy shit, it must mean something. It must mean something that the sun was darkened. It must mean something that there was an eclipse. This is the first time in history of any record of the sun darkening. It is also remarkably close to the beginning of record keeping, which would not have been the moon, but that of a celestial object transiting between the sun and earth, darkening our world in shadow. There is a 0% chance that you can state that with accuracy. In order to state this sentence with accuracy, right? Not the first time in history of the record of the sun darkening. I'm not even going to take contention with that. I do not know. But this part, how do you know that it was not the moon? How do you know that it was not the moon, but instead another celestial object? We do have an object that quite often eclipses, right? And that is the perfect word to use. It comes between the sun and the earth, darkening the sun. That is a thing that happens repeatedly. I think we get at least two a year. Now, you may not see both of them, you may not see either of them, but they happen, right? Every single year, there are two eclipses, total eclipses. Somewheres on the planet, there are partials in addition to that. And so it's going to require some extraordinary evidence to say that this is not an eclipse, right? Now, we are dealing with antiquity where record keeping was fairly new, okay? But we can extrapolate back in time. The problem with trying to do that is to precisely date a singular date in how far ago? 2965 BC, right? That is the difference between January 1st and January 2nd, is the difference between an eclipse and not, right? And if you are 6 hours off, you missed the eclipse, right? Knowing that this was an object and not the moon, that is an assumption. And it may be a valid one. There may be some veracity to it. It may have something to back it up, but we don't have a footnote for this, right? We got a footnote for the sun being darkened in the daytime. We got a footnote for the periods of time that Enoch resigned from being with people. We have footnotes for that. That is an explanation of where I got this from. We do not have an explanation for the first time in history or that the moon was not the object that caused the darkening. Back to the text. Having spent 66 years above the ecliptic, the ancient Earth killer comet group, which can't exist if space is not real, now begins its 330-year orbit below the ecliptic for a total orbital duration of 396 years, half of Nibiru's orbit. The comet group fractured away from Nibiru, and the 66 years over the ecliptic is exactly 792 months. The 930 years of Adam's life from his banishment till death parallels the length of Anunnaki history from 5239 BC, the beginning of their chronology, to the destruction of the day star in 4309 BC that ended the binary system, destroyed whole planets, and rearranged the entire solar system. I am not in opposition to this theory, right? I do believe that the Earth is not in the right place, that it does not consist of the right mass that it should be. And I believe that this destruction of planets was not the whole planet, but instead a part of it, that the Earth was significantly larger and called Tiamat, that there was an event that caused the destruction of Tiamat, resulting in the formation of the Earth as the sphere that it is, and the moon, a chunk of the Earth that orbits us in a fairly predictable manner, and the asteroid belt where the Earth should sit. All of those things, in my estimation, are not outside of the realm of conceivability. They may not be true, but they are at least something that could be, right? And so I am not in disagreement that this is a thing that could have happened. I am not in disagreement that it could have been a binary star. Now, we are in disagreement in the outflow of that, right? I don't believe that the collapse of the star would necessitate the formation of a black hole, and black holes function in a way that is somewhat up for debate, right? Some people believe that it is a total, complete collapse of all things and no return. Some people believe that it is a change, a transition from point A to point B. And that is closer to where I am, right? I believe that the existence is toroidal. You are surrounded by an electromagnetic emanation that is a toroid. The Earth is surrounded by an electromagnetic emanation that is a toroid. Every single element in existence in its primary state exists in a state that is a toroid. It is an emanation and a return point. Now, as far as the sun goes, if there was indeed a black hole, right, then the collapse is inevitable. There is no simulation that is going to pull you out of that. But if instead of that, it is the opposite end of that connection, instead of the black hole being here, instead is the emanation point, a source point for energetic investment into the rest of the system, as can definitely be argued, that would explain a multitude of things. It would explain why the ecliptical exists, because we are held in the stasis point of equilibrium in the toroidal field. We go through our orbit in that stasis point, right? And so we are moving in space around the sun, but it is in a very narrow window of movement. Yes, we move up and down on the ecliptical a little bit, right? There is some variation in that. But for the most part, we are held in the stasis point of the toroidal field that is emanating from the sun. We have those stasis points here. It is defined by our equator, and there are things that you can find on the equator that are unique in the planetary system. I am not in opposition to a binary system at one point in time. I am in opposition to a neutrino or a black hole being existent here. Now, there is the return effect, and so it is possible that the emanation point and the return point are the same, right? That would be the sun as both the quasar and the black hole. That is both the strong attractive force, the weak attractive force, and it includes gravitation and electromagnetism, the four forces of creation that we can measure. All of that is explained, right? This is not in opposition to that. All of that is still, however, very much speculative. Back to the text. Recall that 930 years is the product of both orbital periods of Nibiru, 792, and Phoenix, 138. With Adam's death, God intends to fulfill his promise to his first earthborn son, that he would have an altar erected for him as a sign to all generations that Adam, and by extension, humanity, was forgiven. Forgiven for what? Forgiven for what? Right? We've dealt with original sin. It is a fallacy. It is completely baseless and has no veracity for basing upon it anything. Right? There is no need to be forgiven from getting discernment that God fully intended you to get. And that was original sin, right? It wasn't sex. Sorry to tell you, it wasn't disobedience. They didn't have the capacity to disobey before they had the capacity to discern between good and evil. If you don't have the knowledge that anything can be evil, you cannot act in evilness. It's simply not a possibility. And so, original sin falls flat on its face in a multitude of ways, which I have described in my book on a couple of them. As seen in 2815 BC, this altar is the Great Pyramid. And also, right, assuming that Adam is not the first earthborn son, right? He was not born on the earth, he was born in the garden, and you can believe that the garden is not on earth, but who would be the firstborn son? Cain. Not Seth. Seth would be the thirdborn son. Since the establishment of an Anunnaki matriarch in 3103 BC has now passed 138 years, a phoenix orbit, or 1656 months, 553 times 3. Also, the 148 years of the Mayan calendar is 1776 months, 1776 being a number encoded many times within the geometrical measurements of the Great Pyramid and found in timelines throughout history involving the Abrahamic, Israelite descendants of the Sethite lineage. Here's something that I didn't bring up, but is relevant, right? We can make assumptions. I do bring that up quite a lot, but it is an assumption to say that we know the pyramid inch. I know. We can extrapolate from the finished dimensions what we believe to have been their unit of measurement, but that doesn't make that true. I mean, it is entirely possible that they had a decimal system that allowed them to use exponents of their multiples, right? And so it is possible that the inch, as recorded as the pyramid inch, is perfect. I am not necessarily disagreeing with that, but it is an assumption. It is entirely possible that the inch was exactly half that measurement. And so what we consider to be an inch is in reality two. It is equally possible that it is double. And so what we consider to be an inch is exactly half. There is no way recorded to verify that, right? We can make all of the assumptions we want based upon the math, and I am not here to disagree with those assumptions. I am only pointing out that it is an assumption, right? I don't hold the technical expertise on the dimensions of the pyramid. I am not trying to intimate that I am an Egyptologist with the full knowledge of things, but we know that the narrative is not correct. I mean, we know that at a very minimum, what we have been told about the pyramids is not true. It is extremely likely that they exceed the date of any possibility being recorded in the Chronicon by a significant amount. You can argue what that significant amount is. I know some people have a problem with 12,600 years. There is reasons why we use that number. It is not an arbitrary designation. But I'm not the expert on that subject matter. I am inquisitive. I use that as a reference point to check against understandings, but it is not a fully fleshed understanding. It is a speculation. And I do try to maintain that speculation should remain speculation. That's going to bring us to the end of this particular exploration of the Archaix Chronicon. Hopefully, I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion, maybe even a little bit of entertainment to a series of somewhat difficult understandings. I understand that I have some unconventional beliefs, and I do have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something that I apologize for. I want the truth. Whether or not I have it now or not, whether or not it completely changes my entire worldview, I am willing to change, but there has to be a significant reason to do so. I am on record changing my positions on a variety of things, right? Not just the one example that I used before, but you can go back. This guy on the internet, Indian Jesus, he brought me on his show and we had a debate. We talked about some ideas, and I came away from that with a new understanding about something. And I made a whole video about that new understanding that I achieved and what I plan to do about that. Right. I took full responsibility for a greater understanding of the knowledge that was available. I assimilated it into my core being and I disseminated to others. That is a repeated pattern in my life. It doesn't matter how long somebody else holds this particular viewpoint. If it is shown to be inconsistent with itself, then that is what it is. If it is shown to be verifiably untrue in a variety of ways, that's just what it is. If it completely undermines my understanding and there is sufficient reason to believe that it is accurate, I will completely change my understanding. I have done so repeatedly with proof. And so, if you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow, throw me a comment whether you agree or disagree with anything that is stated. Put it in the box, and if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. Hopefully, y'all are seeing that already. There's people who disagree with me. I am fine with that, right? You're not going to rile me up. You're not going to get me pissed off. Those days are done, right? I'm doing things these days that are more important than my emotions. I'm doing things that are more important than my understandings. I am on a path, and that path has borne fruit already. If I continue to do what I'm doing, right? If I put out these videos all the way to the end and I don't get a single crew member, if nobody watches any of them, if there is a zero view count from here on out, nobody else ever sees it, I still have to do it. I still have to go through here and I still have to pick apart the parts that don't make sense. It is what I have been told to do. And since I have been told to do it, I'm going to do it. Right? I was told to start exercising. I started exercising. I was told to quit smoking. I quit smoking. I told to quit taking the medications. I quit taking the medications. Now, who told me that? My intuition. The spirit of discernment that lives within me. And every single one of those instances has led to my life getting better. It has led to me being on this path. And the more that I accept this path and quit resisting trying to avoid things, the better it gets. Yeah, I'm blessed. I went from walking with a cane to training for a 5K. I mean, I went from not being able to talk at volume or with variation for years to being able to express myself in the manner that I need to, as I want to, with variation as I want. It's a miracle. It is quite literally a miracle. And the miracles that have come, and there are multiples, have all been from the embracing of this path, of walking this particular set of steps. I don't choose the steps, right? The Chronicon came to me as the next step, and so I took it. Jasher came to me as the next step, so I take it. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I'm following the voice, right? There are two voices. One leads up, one leads down. It is up to you which one to choose. I've just got the spirit of discernment, and I know which one to listen to these days. It doesn't matter if anybody ever watches it, but they're going to. Right? This is something, right? This is above me. This is not about me. It has never been about me. That's the part that y'all don't understand, right? That's the part that has you locked in the room with me, not me in the room with you, right? I'm operating under something here, and it sounds so prideful to say, and so I don't, but I am on a mission. I am doing something specific, and it is about truth. It is not about people, right? There are some people who I will be attacking, right? I'm not attacking Jason. That is not my intention at all. I think that Jason is genuinely misguided, and he doesn't have to agree with me. We don't have to be friends. We don't have to interact. I'm not here trying to get on his platform. I'm not, right? I tag him because that is the honorable thing to do. If I was sitting here talking shit about him and I didn't tag him, that would be dishonorable. I am not a dishonorable man. I face my challenges head on. And the challenge is truth, not Jason. I'm not facing Jason. I'm facing the ideas. That's why we're doing this. I'm not going to chase going on his live streams. I'm not going to chase going, even talking to him. That is not what I am here for. If there is a conversation to be had, so be it. I am open to it. But I'm not here to chase someone else's validation of my ideas. What I am doing here is letting you know why I can't understand in the way that you do. If you like what I'm doing, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow, throw me a comment. If you really like it, hit me with a super thanks. Consider joining for a membership or picking up a copy of any of my books or reaching out to me through the links provided down below. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been pittstake. Peace. Thank you, Lord.